Call on the Minister to make a statement if he wishes and introduce his new advisers.
Thank you, Chair. I have no statement, but I shall introduce the people that have joined me here for this final session today. To my immediate left is Mick Sherry, the Electoral Commissioner in South Australia. To his left is Alice Cashin, the Deputy Electoral Commissioner. To my right is Connie Freeman, Director of Organisational Performance, Department of Treasury and Finance. And behind me we have Megan Bradman, Manager Joint Parliamentary Services, Rick Crump, the Clerk of the House of Assembly, Lou Batisma, the Manager for Finance for the Electoral Commission of SA, and Tony Smith, Manager of Policy and Entitlements at the Department for Treasury and Finance.
Thank you. Thank you. Member for Hyson, do you have an opening statement or anything? No, straight to questions. Member for Hyson.
Straight to questions. And
any indication of the order you want to do this in?
well,
They're all there, so.
provided it's not necessitating an instant move of personnel, I've just got a couple of questions about electorate services, and then I'll just flag. I'll go to EXA for a bit. Budget paper 4, volume 4, page 146.
Yep.
And well, the agency statement's covered itself in glory this year because the whole Special Minister of State side has kind of regularised itself, and we see that there's no doubt about it, Minister. The Minister is the Minister responsible for electorate services, which is Program 1 within DTF. And I go to the program summary that's about halfway down page 146. Where we see expenses, and I'm also just paying attention to FTEs. The budget for 25-26 in terms of employee benefit expenses is up on the estimated result for 24-25 in the order of $531,000, and that's despite a 0.1 FTE reduction. Is there an explanation for that? Is there a single cause or multiple causes? If so, what are they?
Yeah, we don't have information before us about that. About a 10% increase in employee benefit expenses, but I'm happy to take that on notice and bring back a reply.
And if that might be the whole answer, but I guess, can I just press it to the point of, is the Minister able to at least identify to the committee, is that the result of increased payments to employees who are employed, and or is it characterised by redundancies for employees leaving?
Don't have those figures in the underlying reasons, but as I say, happy to take it on notice.
But it could include one or both of those.
Again, without the figure, without
those. Yeah, no. So, and limiting ourselves then to matters of principle in terms of the accounting process, those are both in the nature of employee benefit expenses. Is that correct?
Again, how these are treated in an accounting way, redundancies. Happy to take on notice and bring back what it is in this particular case.
Okay. So to be clear, we don't know what the $531,000 relates to, and
the 550, which I did the difference between those two figures.
Yep, the 531.
That's exactly what I'm going to take on notice.
We don't know what it relates to, and we also don't know, indeed, whether or not it might include one or both of employee payments and or redundancy payments.
Once again, I wouldn't want to speculate and inadvertently mislead
the
committee, so that's happy to.
We don't know.
Take that away.
Okay. If an answer emerges in the course of, that's why I thought I'd ask early, if an answer emerges in the course of the of the next 45 minutes, then I'd be happy to be interrupted to come back to that.
I'm always happy to interrupt you, Shadow Attorney General.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Attorney. So parking that for the moment, but only parking it from my point of view and perhaps leaving it on the road as far as the Minister and those here are concerned. I turn then to Budget Paper 4, Volume 2, at page, it's really page 12 that I'm heading for, but which is the Volume 2.
Yep.
And as I said, over to EXA. And
Okay.
so we see the agency, Electoral Commission of South Australia, commencing at page 9. And by the time we get to page 12, we first see the objective, the ministerial responsibilities and a description of the administered items. And I might turn actually more particularly to page 13 and the program net cost of services summary. And in the table that immediately follows, there's one program, electoral services, and unsurprisingly, there's this significant increase in the 25-26 budget, up from 7.5 million estimated result this year to 39,838,000 for the budgeted year, and that's apparently for the purpose of the 2026 state election. EXA is also responsible for public funding of election campaigns for participating individuals and parties, and for special assistance funding for the reimbursement of administrative costs under new regime. Bearing that in mind, under the new funding regime for political parties that's going to take effect from 1 July, will EXA be managing that and those relevant payments?
In terms of the administration funding that the member referred to, I'm advised that applications after 6 months of operation, so at the end of the year, will be put into the Electoral Commission. They will assess those applications and then seek funding from Treasury for that administration funding, is my advice as to how the process is intended to work.
So the increase in funding for EXA that we see there in the table,
Table up the top of 13. No, which table are we?
yeah, it's the table towards the top of 13, that one line item,
Yep.
electoral services.
Yep.
Does that increase in funding include any of the public funding? If so, what amount?
My advice is no, that doesn't. No. That will be separately sought from Treasury. Has EXA, and this might relate to the work that comprises what's more or less in line with the 24-25 budget to the estimated result. It's a minor increase over budget, but it's within that range. Has EXA done any work on what expected public funding will look like, and as well as the recurring administrative cost of that? We'll maybe deal with those separately. Shall we public funding first?
Yep.
So under the new legislation that the Parliament has passed, There's public funding that is public funding that can be in advance, and then the remainder public funding after an election. I'll just get some advice about both those elements. I have been advised that there has been some very preliminary work undertaken, but in relation to public funding, although there might be some advanced public funding that can be derived from past results, the entirety of public funding will be dependent on results at that particular election. And you also asked about administration funding.
Yeah.
Have you done some work as to, or you'll get a mic to get those put in?
But these are just
I'm advised that, in relation to the total quantum administration funding, there's been some very initial work that have undertaken, but of course, as I said, that they will be claims that will be put in after the first 6 months of the new scheme, which starts 1st of July, so the 6 months will be at the end of this calendar year, that participants will put in their claims for administrative funding will be assessed by EXA and then asked of Treasury.
Yeah, and so still with an eye to that table and the funding for 25-26, 39,833,000. Yeah, so none of that amount is funding for distribution. We got that.
Yeah, that's my advice. That is the amount that it costs on a yearly basis for everything EXA does.
Yep.
Plus, as you noted, it's a very significant increase because it's an election year and running. State election is a very expensive proposition.
And so it's in terms of EXA's administrative burden and in terms of this new public funding scheme, perhaps by reference to work done and or preparation for the cost of enforcement. Has EXA done any work in the course of this last year, and if so, at what cost, on enforcement compliance for the changes to be applied on 1 July?
My advice for the financial year that's about to end, for 24-25, there's an estimated just under $50,000 for the requirements to prepare for the new funding disclosure, administrative funding, public funding, compliance and enforcement, and because it's not in yet, but that rises to in between 900,000 and 1 million after that, once all elements of the new regime come into operation.
And that means this coming year.
Yes, I'm advised that the indicative figures are for 25-26 949,000, and for 26-27 967,000. And then going forward for 27-28, dropping down, I presume post-election, post having to make all the calculations for public funding, to 729,000, and 28-29 740,000.
Just sort of seeing where that sounds in terms of any more specific reference in the papers. Is that more particularly the
amounts that I've just given?
Yeah, the amounts that have just been given. Are they more particularly set out? If so, I've missed it.
These are advice that I've been able to give you over and above what's set out in budget papers in response to your question.
Right. So understanding that, So if so, if we're to find where those costs, particularly for 25-26 obviously, are to be drawn from, are we drawing them from the 39,833,000 or?
My advice is these funds are held by Treasury, like the funds for the administration, payments to the parties and for the public funding, held by Treasury and to be released to EXA.
Right, okay, so the whole thing, including...
EXA administering it and the actual payments themselves are not within the 39 million.
So if and when and to whatever extent those questions are asked of the Treasurer,
Yep.
then the Treasurer will be able to identify that there's an outsourced service to be provided by EXA at Treasury's cost for the administration, including of compliance and enforcement.
And the actual payments themselves.
Yeah,
That's the advice.
The payments themselves clearly are in a separate category,
Yep.
but we're just focused on EXA. And so whatever resources EXA needs to do oversight, administration, compliance, enforcement, you name it, all those activities for which it's responsible, then we'll see EXA drawing on DTF funds that are not identified in EXA's budget papers at all.
They will be, it's just the timing. So all of this will be transitioned over.
My advice is they will be reflected in EXA's budget papers going forward, but as this is all relatively new, it hasn't been transferred to EXA's budget yet while they work out exactly what's needed. I'm giving you indicative costs that EXA are thinking at the moment.
And those indicative costs, are they drawn from anywhere that might be revealed, just for coherence and reference, in anything within the rest of DTF's?
Again, I'm not responsible for
No, I know
that part of the budget, so I'm not sure I could provide much guidance for that.
All right, appreciate that. We're not, as it were, at the point of being able to find those costs on the face of, or set out as a line item anywhere that the minister's aware of, and certainly.
No. It's not that I just couldn't tell you. It's not in my budget, in my area within the budget.
Yeah, well, that's
so
helpful.
Where it's accounted for, that is not a question I have an answer for.
Sure, but it's helpful to the extent that you're not going to find it in the EXA budget provision.
Not this year, but as I've said, my advice is the intention is you will find it in the EXA budget and going into the future.
And it'll therefore be in the old reversion to the normal administrative year on year. It might be regarded as, you know, an anticipated addition on the 7.5 million or so that it's usually running at, will be this administrative compliance and enforcement.
There's new streams of administrative funding that the legislation that's passed paid, so you would presume that it will reflect on that sort of, and we talked about it in other hearings, that baseline essentially for the agency.
So staying with the same table, there's a estimated result for 24-25 that's 160,000 or so over the 24-25 budget in terms of same table, same line.
At the top of page 13.
Yes.
Yep.
So focused on the 24-25 year and comparing the budget to the estimated result.
Yeah.
And we've got a variance of about 150,000, 160,000. And I might just ask, is there any particular cause for that overspend, estimated result in excess of budgeted amount?
So the estimated result being 166,000 above the what was forecast in the budget.
Or
accounts for
forecast, what was budgeted, yeah.
What was budgeted, what accounts, what is made up, what does that 166,000 make up?
Understand the question.
One of the reasons might be, and this is another one, might need to take on notice for that small variance, things, one of it could be the Black by-election that occurred in that year that funding was provided and there was an underspend in there. That may be the a possible explanation, but I'm happy to go away and see if there's any further information to account this.
Well,
And I commend the member for not using the term budget blowout for this $166,000.
it sort of tends towards, and I wouldn't have guessed
I know,
that.
it's quite a small variance in.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have guessed that was the cause. I think, in fact, any more substantial items. One possibility is that, of course, there was the fairly high-profile piece of litigation that was the result of the challenge to the 2022 Adelaide City Council election, and that went for some time and resulted in part of the election being declared void, and that's all, public record. By reference to that discrete excess amount, is that in any way an answer? And in any event, what was the total cost to EXA of that whole exercise? Including EXA being represented in the Court of Disputed Returns and so on.
Advice is it's in the total over a number of financial years in the order of $500,000 in total for investigation and legal representation services. And of course the new election is estimated, well, the new election is paid for by the Adelaide City Council. That's not paid for by EXA, and it's the Central Ward election to be held on the 25th of August is the approximate cost, subject to number of post-vote returns, but approximate cost to be borne by the City of Adelaide will be about $85,000.
85?
85.
But EXA will administer it.
Yeah, EXA administers it, but it is like general local government elections, it's paid for by those bodies whose elections they are.
And will there be any cost to EXA of administering that election? If so,
No,
what's
my
the cost?
advice is no. It's essentially full cost recovery for conducting that election.
So cost recovery in addition to the 85,000?
Oh, no. So cost recovery for the $85,000. Yeah, the EXA don't pay for they get reimbursed for the conduct of the election, but the legal amount you don't get reimbursed.
No, we have to.
So yeah, the amounts for legal costs and investigation costs for the litigation that precedes this election is borne by EXA.
Yeah, I understand that. And I just focused on the supplementary election. So the supplementary election... supplementary election will cost about $85,000. EXA will bear that and then seek reimbursement from the Adelaide City Council of the whole amount.
As is the usual course of any local government election.
Is there any work for EXA to do, and if so, is it doing it, to prevent or avert such circumstances, that dispute occurring in the future? Is there anything for EXA to do?
I'm happy to say that I'm advised that there are integrity measures that EXA are implementing for the upcoming City of Adelaide Central Ward election to be held, as I said, on the 25th of August. Things in place include City of Adelaide staff are carefully examining each voter's roll application that's received. Ballot packs are only sent to electors on the voter's roll. EXA staff will check the name on the returned declaration envelope matches the enrolled elector and the signature matches the name, and that where required, EXA staff will check the signature on the returned envelope against signature on enrolment forms and also contact electors to confirm their vote. So that there are significant integrity measures, I'm advised, being put in place following this.
And having traversed the cost of the litigation borne by EXA, the cost of the supplementary election that'll be borne by EXA and then reimbursed to EXA by Adelaide City Council, those measures then that have been just described, are they adding to the cost otherwise of that supplementary election in part, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm advised that no, this doesn't add significantly to the cost.
So it's not rendering an election more costly on each occasion?
And my advice is no, it's not.
No. And so it's the application of measures that will have that are with the object of avoiding a vulnerability to such a dispute in the future.
Yeah, that's my advice.
And what cost do they come at?
The measures I've outlined.
No. Yes.
My advice is that no significant extra cost.
Right. Okay. Well, still at Budget Paper 4, Volume 2, and I have a look at the first page, it's still at page 13 for the key agency outputs, and the first dot point is the conducting of elections for representatives to be members of the local First Nations voice. And I think more particularly, or at least also referred in sub-program 1.2, non-parliamentary electoral services at page 17. The second dot point highlight for 24-25 is the conducting of two First Nations voice supplementary elections, perhaps by reference to the dot point item at page 17. What was the cost of conducting the two First Nations voice supplementary elections?
For the two supplementary elections, I'm advised our total funding provided was $386,000, although actual costs ended up being $247,000. So just under $250,000 for two supplementary elections. That'd be $125,000 approximately for each one, which compares very favourably to the three elections, by-elections that we've seen for the House of Assembly. I think the black by-election was some $682,000, and I'm advised that both the Dunstan and Bragg elections were more expensive than that.
And we've just addressed the cost, perhaps for the sort of completeness of recent references of the supplementary election in Adelaide City Council in the order of $85,000. Presumably the logistics contribute to, if one wants to compare Adelaide City Council supplementary election with a voice supplementary election, logistics and distance and the rest contribute to the $40,000.
Certainly, I know in previous discussions that I've had with the Electoral Commission that when you go out to regional areas, everything you do in election tends to cost that a little bit more.
So, but the two, am I right in drawing at least a broad comparison? 85,000 for the Adelaide City Council supplementary and about 125 for a First Nations Voice supplementary election.
Well, I'll give another comparison. The 123,500 on average for a First Nations supplementary election compared to $750,000 for the 3 Liberal members who've left their seats. So in that comparison, the First Nations Voice elections cost a fraction of what the each by-election has cost when a Liberal member's left a seat so far in this term.
Well, then, in terms of that analysis, then, if we're to embark on it, how many electors were eligible to participate in those supplementary elections?
I don't have figures in terms of the number, and one thing that we do know though, we don't have complete figures. There is when people enrol, there's not a box that's ticked to in terms of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander identification. So we don't have a figure to tell you this is what the roll is, because it's not something that's been collected by the consistently. Is it collected at all?
The AEC have to do their best as far as identifying those electors that might be Aboriginal by matching it.
So there's no role that you can say, well, this percentage voted, because it's not.
Right.
It's not something that is collected when people tick a box on a form.
And in terms of the first overall election,
Yep.
am I right that data is not retained, therefore, as a comparator? So not that anyone expected the supplementary election, but is there not even a comparator that's available?
I don't have figures, but there may be this many people voted at the first election and this many people voted in the same geographical region for the second one. Without having figures in front of me, my guess would be in a supplementary election, you would see less people voting, which tends to follow what happens also in for state elections at a general election, for any the seat of Bragg or Dunstan or Black. You would ordinarily expect more to vote at a state election when there's great awareness than you'd expect at a supplementary by-election in the future.
So it's not known how many voters were eligible to participate.
Well, there isn't a tick on a box on a form that the AC has when you enrol.
No, it's not known how many were eligible to participate, including by reference to the election that had occurred. It's just a question of clarification. There is no retention of a form of roll based on what has occurred previously.
I guess if the question is, is a roll kept of those who voted before and then added to for those who voted the next
Or
one?
compared against?
No, that's
No?
not done, no.
No. Can the Minister advise the committee how many votes were cast at those elections?
I'm advised it was about 2,600 at the
First one.
at the initial First Nation Voice elections, and
49, because there was only one contestant.
there was for the contested election for the supplementary election was about 150 votes.
150 votes in total for both?
There was only one that was contested.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Although, it would be misleading to say you don't apportion costs to the non-contested one, because of course you do a whole lot of work setting it up and getting ready.
Yeah, and hence, but the Minister's satisfied that in terms of apportionment, they are about equal in terms of the cost of preparation.
I don't have those figures. As I said, I do have the figure that the actual costs for both of them, the non-contested one and the work that was necessarily involved in doing that, and the contested one were 247. My guess is that the contested one might have been a greater portion of that, but I don't have those figures.
And I've sort of gone there a little bit, but in terms of comparing the supplementary elections to the original elections, was there anything, and is there anything for the future that EXA has acquired in terms of capacity and knowledge and expertise and so on, in order to apply for the towards the next such occasion. If it doesn't include, any reference material, is it a matter of a novel
I can say,
endeavour?
because as you'd expect, I've had the benefit of discussions with the Electoral Commission about these elections, and certainly I think in previous discussions the advice has been that there has been significant amounts learnt by the Electoral Commission in a whole range of areas, including working with Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, particularly in remote and regional areas. I remember a statistic that just under half, something like 46 or 47% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people live outside the Adelaide metropolitan area, which is a much higher proportion of people outside the area than for non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander South Australians. So the working with different groups, ACOs and others, certainly I know is something that the EXA did to a great extent during the first election, but of course lessons will be learned about how to do that better.
And in terms of, I don't know if better is the right word, but in terms of the way that that's become familiar locally and so on, there's a matter of staffing polling booths, and EXA's got a whole variety of ways of doing that for elections of all different kinds. Is there a prospect of, to what extent is EXA staff travelling around the state for the purposes of these elections in a way that it may need to do less of as the process became more familiar?
So I guess there are two elements to that. I'm advised that EXA is starting up awareness and education campaigns shortly in relation to that there will be the second lot of First Nations voice elections, but for these second elections, the polling places and polling officials will be utilised as the same as on polling day, so that there will be a great deal of synergies able to take place as state election polling places and polling officials that are in any event there to conduct the general election in March 2026 for South Australia to be utilised for First Nations polling as well.
Now, the minutes remaining, I might just head back to page 146 of volume 4. I'm back. So just a few moments back on electorate services, and just start by going back to where I left that question. I appreciate the Minister took it on notice, but there's also been a half hour or so.
I haven't had any notes passed to me, I'm afraid.
No, all right. So the question is to the reason for the 531,000 in additional employee benefit expenses, notwithstanding a 0.1 downward FTE, is a matter that the Minister's taken on notice. Just in case there was anything to add while we're here, all right. So I think perhaps most conveniently at 146, who's the current manager of electorate services, and when did the current manager begin in that position?
I'm advised Lisa Samazia holds that position. I'm advised she was acting in that position and was formally appointed to the role very late last year or very early this year.
And what happened to the previous one?
There was I'm advised in that position previously, a long-term manager in that position. In between Lisa coming in, there was a someone who was in there for only a couple of months, and then Lisa's took over the position as acting and has since started ongoing late last year, early this year.
So in relation to the, perhaps take them each in turn, what was the period of that short term?
I'm advised a matter of months.
And does that previous manager still work in electorate services?
I'm advised no.
No, and were the circumstances of departure voluntary or otherwise?
Yeah, I'm advised that we don't discuss individual employment matters of very specific individuals, but I'm advised that the person who's in there for a short amount of time has taken up other opportunities.
In terms of staff turnover in the last 12 months, how many staff have left electorate services, and for what reasons?
So the making up those 40 are the driver fleet. We don't have information in relation to that, but outside the driver fleets of some 25. So there are 14 FTEs in the actual electorate services team. I'm advised it's about 2 that are turnover.
And the circumstances of that turnover of those 2 is something that you're not talking about?
Yeah, as I say, within individual employment matters wouldn't traverse them here.
Well, if I still at 146, I think if I'm turning to the highlights, and I'll go to the first dot point. There's the negotiation of a new enterprise agreement for assistance to members of the South Australian Parliament. Now that's described as a highlight. I haven't cross-checked it against an associated target, but my understanding is that the EBA negotiations are still ongoing.
That's right. They're in advanced stage, but still ongoing.
So is there a need to revise the highlight to sort of describe it in terms of it being in the present tense?
Well, maybe it might be, instead of negotiating an ing instead of an ed may be a way to describe it, but it is.
It's not quite complete.
Yeah.
And when are they? When's it going to be complete? And would you describe the current state of it, therefore, as delayed? I mean, was this all prepared? The budget paper's all prepared in circumstances where it was anticipated this would be complete.
No. I think that's just a wording. I don't think there was an anticipation that this was definitely going to be completed, and then it went to print, and then it wasn't completed. Yeah, I know this is ongoing. It is in an advanced stage. I think there's already been one vote on a potential agreement. So it is one of those ones that is in an advanced stage, but it's not completed now.
And would you describe it as a delay at this point? It was just
No.
It's ongoing.
I wouldn't use that at all. In my now 3 and a bit years experience as Industrial Relations Minister, and as we went through the quite a number of agreements that are up for negotiation at the moment, and with it used to be 3 years, it's now a maximum of 4 years agreements can run. So every term of Parliament, every agreement will come up. I wouldn't describe this as a delay or anything that's particularly different from other agreements.
Has any particular industrial organisation raised any concerns regarding the EBA process or its terms?
For assistance. It wouldn't surprise the member that regularly unions will meet with ministers, put forward their views to ministers, in whether it's firefighters, ambulance officers, doctors, teachers, a whole range of areas. I think many members are represented by the ASU. I'm sure I've had representation from the ASU as I talk to them about a whole range of other matters and who they represent and issues to do with local government, portable long service leave. But in terms of if the members asking, have concerns been raised that this is completely outside how all other negotiations are going? No, that certainly hasn't been raised.
Alas, the allotted time has expired. the examination of the Electoral Commission of SA and its administered items, the House of Assembly, Joint Parliamentary Services and administered items, and the Legislative Council are complete. The examination of the proposed payments for the administered items of the Department of Treasury and Finance are adjourned until tomorrow.